Hey guys, this is Onya. I'm making this video to go over. I'm making this video to go over the different books that I have in my version of the Bible. I made a video on this. Hey guys, sorry I lost connection there. So I am making this video because I wanted to go over which books are in my version of the Bible, which books I consider part of the canon. I have made a video on this previously on my channel, but it is a very long video. It's about 5 hours long, and I go through each book and explain a little bit about each book. So a lot of people don't have the ability to spend 5 hours and listen to all that, which is understandable. And I tend to make long videos, at least in the past. I'm going to be trying going forward to make shorter videos. And I'm at work right now, and I have 30-minute lunch break. So the fact that I have only 30 minutes kind of forces me to have a shorter video. So I think that's beneficial. So I'll probably sometimes be making videos during my lunch break going forward. Um, so I'm going to give a much shorter version, a much shorter video on what books I believe should be part of the Bible, or my Bible, which books I'm going to include in my version of the Bible. So as a shorthand reference, I include, for the most part, all the books of the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible in my Bible canon. The only exceptions are in the broader canon of the Ethiopian Bible. There is a book called Josephon, which I do not consider part of the Bible, but I think it's useful for study, but I don't think it's part of the Bible. And the books of Maccabean, I'm undecided whether they should be part of the Bible or not. I need to study those more in depth. I formally have included them in my version of the Bible, but I am putting them on a maybe list. So the books of Maccabean, they're different than the Maccabees. So you have the Ethiopian Orthodox books, which there's a lot of those, and I'm going to go into some of that in a little bit, but you also have the Dead Sea Scrolls. I pretty much accept all the Dead Sea Scrolls as part of the Bible. Of course, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there are multiple copies of different books, but I consider them all essentially scripture. The different manuscripts have varying degrees of accuracy, but they're all manuscripts of books that I include in my version of the Bible. You also have Nag Hammadi, the manuscripts found at Nag Hammadi, which are classified by scholars as Gnostic. Some of those documents, I believe, are unfairly characterized as Gnostic, and I include them as in part of in my Bible, but not all of the books, because some of the books in Nag Hammadi are definitely Gnostic. Then there's also the Apostolic Fathers. I include those as part of the Bible, and there are various acts of the apostles, like apocryphal acts, like the Acts of Paul, the Acts of Peter, the Acts of Andrew, John, Philip, etc. I include those as well in my version of the Bible. So that's kind of like a very, very brief overview, but now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail into which books I include, and I'm going to emphasize the ones that are more important. So first you have the patriarchal books, and those would be books such as the Life of Adam and Eve. I include, now there are books called the Books of Adam, which some people believe should be part of the Bible, and I do not. There's the first and second book of Adam, and I reject those. I can explain in other videos at some point why I reject those, but I don't believe those should be part of the Bible. So first and second book of Adam. And what a lot of people don't know who accept those two books is that there's also a third and fourth book of Adam. which is part of that same series. So if you're gonna accept the first two, you're gonna have to also accept the third and the fourth, because they go together. But a lot of people don't know that. So anyways, I don't accept those those books of Adam, but I accept the life of Adam and Eve. Then you have the Book of Enoch, which I consider one of the most important books and foundational to the faith. So we have the Book of Enoch. Then we have Genesis Apocryphon. That was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls in only one manuscript, and that one is a scroll that has a composite number of books in it. It actually is not just one book, it's a series of books. And it's called Genesis Apocryphon because it has stories which parallel the stories in Genesis. And it covers the various patriarchs, such as it starts with Lamech, who is the father of Noah. And you have also the Book of Noah. There's the actual Book of Noah in this Genesis Apocryphon. It literally says a copy of the Book of the Words of Noah, and then it goes and has Noah speaking in the first person. So there's the Book of Noah in the Genesis Apocryphon, and what follows is the Book of Abraham, and then it breaks off in the scroll. The rest of the Book of Abraham isn't preserved in that copy, and that's the only, as I said, that's the only manuscript we have of it, so it's fragmentary, and we're missing the rest of the Genesis Apocryphon. But I also believe there's evidence that there was another book in the Genesis Apocryphon, the Book of Jacob, and it was about Jacob's life. So those are the some of the chief patriarch books. I consider the Genesis Apocryphon so important that I think it's more important than the Book of Genesis. I think it's more important than the Book of Jubilees. It's the foundation of the Book of Genesis. So I highly recommend studying that Genesis Apocryphon, and I think we have enough resources that we could actually reconstruct the Book of Noah almost fully. Likewise, the Book of Abraham. We can reconstruct those two books, I think, very well, based on the Dead Sea Scrolls, Genesis, and Jubilees. Put all that together, and you have a very good reliability of reconstructing those two books of the Genesis Apocryphon. Following that, we have the various testaments of the patriarchs. And there is the Testament of Adam, which is not well preserved, and what we do have of it seems to be later rendition Christianized. But we have Testaments of the 12 Patriarchs. Those have also been Christianized by the scribe. Sorry guys, I got cut off again. I'm not sure where I broke off, but basically, so I was talking about the Testament of Adam, and then there's the Testaments of the 12 Patriarchs. And those, as I was saying, have been Christianized as well, but I think they've been preserved well enough that we can read them and trust them as an authority. We have fragments of the Testament of Levi in a much longer version found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, as well as some Greek manuscripts, which indicate to us that the Testaments of the 12 Patriarchs was originally much longer, and that what we have is a shortened, condensed version by Christian scribes. The longer version has so many parallels with Dead Sea Scroll type of ideas and the books from the Dead Sea Scrolls that it's very clear that the Testaments of the 12 Patriarchs in their fuller form were from were part of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And you have Testament of Kohath and Testament of Amram. Those were by Moses's parents, and I'll answer that in a sec. Moses' father was Amram, and Moses' grandfather was Kohath, and we had a testament from each of those in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Fragmentary, but I consider that authoritative and part of the Bible. Now the question was asked, did the Qumran people perceive a difference between canonical and authoritative? I believe they did. The ancients seem to have had a concept of canon, which is for everybody, and Then the Apocrypha, which are authoritative but not to be shared with everybody because they have some controversial stuff in them, and they are have a lot of mysteries and high teachings in them. And I believe that is the case. There's the twofold division. Second Esdras speaks about this: the 70 secret books and the 24 books for the public. And there's a lot of other books which speak about this this dichotomy of the secret and the public books. So I think the Qumranites had that similar division, but they considered both of them authoritative. Also, I think they made a distinction between the words of God and the words of men, because the scriptures, including the Apocrypha and the public books, have words of God, like thus says the Lord, thus says Yahweh, and it has the opinions of men. So I think they distinguished between the authority of those two types of words in the scriptures. The words of God are absolutely authoritative and no questioning them, as long as we know for a fact that they are what God said. The words of the men, however, can be questioned, can be challenged, and are not fully authoritative, but they are authoritative in the sense that they are from wise men who knew much better than us ever did. So we can trust in general their opinions, but we shouldn't blindly trust them. That's the basic gist for that. Now, I'm definitely not going to have time to go through all the books in my Bible because I started late, had a couple lost connections here, but I'm going to keep going a little bit more. Hopefully I can go through the Old Testament for this video. Basically, you have... So I was speaking of the patriarchal books. That's the only other patriarchal book is the Testament of Job. And I believe the Testament of Job originally included the entire book of Job as well as the Testament of Job. And then later scribes separated the book of Job from the Testament of Job, I think. That's my speculation, but I think there's good reason to believe that. So the Testament of Job is very interesting. It gives a lot of greater context to the whole story of the book of Job. Now, following that, you have the Mosaic books, and those are, I believe, very important. But what's interesting is that in the Dead Sea Scrolls, let's see. All right, so Dwight says, can't wait to see this. I like the Enoch rebuttal. Was greatest I listened to. Yeah, I think you're talking about a video I made about the Book of Enoch and defending it, I think that's what you're referring to. But just so you guys know, Enoch hasn't been perfectly preserved either. There's evidence that the Book of Enoch has some corruptions and has been changed from the original. The Book of Enoch was longer in the original text. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, the fragments of Enoch we have in the Dead Sea Scrolls show that there are longer readings, shorter readings, and the calendar section in particular was much longer than we currently have. So now, so the Mosaic books, what's interesting is there's the 5 books of the Torah, right? Well, what's interesting is the 5 books of Torah in the Dead Sea Scrolls, they do have regular copies of the Torah, but then they have unique alternate copies of the Torah. And those alternate copies of the Torah have, it's a very different version of the Law of Moses. It is basically, it has, there's 2 types. There's the manuscripts that scholars call the reworked Pentateuch, which is Genesis through Deuteronomy, but it's in a very different order, and it's just arranged differently, and extra passages. Then you have what's called the Temple Scroll, and that is, from my research that I've shown you guys, is the more original version of the book of Deuteronomy. So in my version of the Bible, I'm going to have the reworked Pentateuch as the main Torah, and the Temple Scroll as the main version of the book of Deuteronomy. In the part, because Temple Scroll and the reworked Pentateuch are fragmentary, so you have to fill in the blanks for those. So I fill in the blanks by using what we do have, the regular Torah. I use the regular Torah, compare it with the variant Torah, and fill in the holes, the missing pieces of the variant Torah, so that I basically reconstruct the full Torah from the Torah copies we have and the variant Torah in the Dead Sea Scrolls. But other Mosaic books are the Book of Jubilees, and the Book of Jubilees, I believe, is far, far more authoritative and important than the Book of Genesis. There's so much more gold in there that really people are missing. Jubilees gives us connection to the Dead Sea Scrolls in an amazing way. It has many agreements with the Genesis Apocryphon. It refers to the Book of Enoch, summarizes the Book of Enoch. It refers to the Testaments of the 12 Patriarchs, summarizes parts of those. Testament of Kohath and Amram, it summarizes those. There's so much depth in Book of Jubilees. And there's also the Testament of Moses, which is quoted in the Book of Jude as authoritative. But now, the Testament of Moses was actually two different books, the Testament of Moses and the Assumption of Moses. Both I will include in my version of the Bible. Problem is, the Testament of Moses is fragmentary and the Assumption of Moses is lost. But we do have some sources quoting the Assumption of Moses and the Testament of Moses, and I believe we can reconstruct those documents pretty well. And for the Assumption of Moses, we actually have, or maybe it's the Testament of Moses, but we have a special midrash in Hebrew that quotes portions of the lost parts of these two books. It has Moses going into the heavens and being shown the heavens. It has Moses going to Sheol and being shown the torments. And it has Moses is shown different things about the angels and things like that. So that's a very interesting midrash that I believe is very important for reconstructing the lost portions of the Testament and Assumption of Moses. And so then we have the Solomon and David writings. And for David, what's interesting is the Psalms scroll was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's a version of the Book of Psalms, but a very different version. Let's see. Can we get the Book of Noah? That was what is asked. I would just get I would buy the Genesis Apocryphon by Daniel Macchiella. He did a translation that's very good of the Genesis Apocryphon. Also, there's another new one that came out of Genesis Apocryphon called, it's by James Charlesworth. It's the Dead Sea Scrolls series. It's a blue book. It's a little expensive, but that's another one you could buy as well. And that gives some more fresh insight as well. So the Psalm scroll has different extra Psalms, not in our Book of Psalms. It's the same Book of Psalms, but in a different order, radically different order. And many times the Psalms are longer and have some key variants. So my version of the Book of Psalms will have the Psalm scroll as part of it. Now the Psalm scroll comes entirely from the second half of the Book of Psalms. So the Psalm scroll corresponds with sections 4 and 5 of the Book of Psalms. The Masoretic text divides the Book of Psalms into 5 sections. Okay, so Psalm scroll corresponds to sections 4 and 5. And instead of sections 4 and 5 being from the Masoretic text, in my version it would be exclusively from the Psalm scroll. Then you have also from David, you have the Thanksgiving Psalms. I believe those were by David. I will include those in my version of the Bible. And also the Songs of the Sabbath Sacrifice. The book of the Psalm scroll in the Dead Sea Scrolls says that David wrote those Sabbath songs. So I will include those as part of David's songs, but in a different book. I will have it as a different book. And there are Psalms and songs attributed to Solomon, the Psalms of Solomon and the Odes of Solomon. I will be including those as well. And what's interesting to note is there's also 4 songs of David for the days of the year. Psalm Scroll says David did 364 songs for each day of the year. And so we have 4 of those songs. I wish we had the full book, but we only have about 1% of the whole book. But what we do have is pretty interesting, and I will be including those as well. There's, you know how there's the book of Proverbs? Well, there's extra Proverbs in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I believe were Proverbs from Solomon, because the book of Kings says that Solomon had 3,000 Proverbs, okay? And we only have 800 verses of Proverbs in the book of Proverbs. So there were many more Proverbs that Solomon did. Do I have any projection date for publishing? Well, I'm going to start with the regular public books. And so I will be releasing the public books as soon as I can, and then the apocryphal ones will come after. The apocryphal ones are going to take much longer, but the regular books, the projection, I would say would probably be in 5 years from now. That would be my conservative guess. It could take longer, could take shorter, but it's probably not going to be shorter. It's probably going to be about 5 years. But as I said, I'll keep you guys updated, and I will just be sharing with you guys the work I've been doing over time. So my work break is just about over. I'm going to continue this tomorrow and go over through more of this Canon stuff. It's going to be, the whole thing is going to be a little bit long, but not nearly as long as that 5-hour overview I did. It's probably going to be more like an hour, the whole thing, when I go through the Old and New Testament, reviewing which books are part of the Bible. So I'm going to do that. Oh, I actually don't have work tomorrow, so I should be able to finish it tomorrow. So I'll finish this video tomorrow, go through the rest of the books. Hope you guys have a good day, and shalom to you guys, and thank you for the questions, and I'm sorry we had to end it prematurely. God bless you guys.